Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marital Bliss Unfiltered with PV. If you're watching this video and you probably joined earlier today, I want to let you know that we're doing a re-record because we had some audio issues with our earlier session. But today I'm going to be talking about conflict management in marriage and how to navigate conflicts that tends to arise in relationship, how to navigate your disagreements, how to navigate differences without destroying the union. So if you're new here, I'm PV, and this is a space for everyone where we talk about all things relationship and how to build a thriving relationship. So today we're going to be talking about conflict management and how to address it. And one thing that I want to say is that conflict is inevitable in every single relationship. Does not matter the type of relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or it is a platonic relationship, conflict is bound to happen. However, what makes the difference is how we navigate through conflict when it does arise. So conflict is not the issue, conflict is not the enemy, but how individuals navigate conflict is what determines whether that relationship is going to thrive or whether, the conflict is going to tear relationships or tear people apart. So today I'm going to be sharing just quickly, about a couple of ways that, as individuals, we can navigate conflict in the relationship. So earlier this week, I shared some, just details about some information about conflict in marriage. A lot of people say, what, if I'm experiencing conflict in my relationship, does that mean that the relationship is broken? Does that mean that the relationship is damaged? Please don't be too quick to label your relationship. As a matter of fact, don't label your relationship. Every relationship, even the godly relationships, does experience moments and seasons of, conflict. The godly relationships also, they experience, conflict. However, what sets different relationships apart is how each parties navigates those relationships. So conflict in and by itself is not an enemy. And one thing that I want to share is that, conflict actually helps us to, understand the differences. So conflict tends to arise to help us understand the differences, between individuals, and it gives us and exposes moments, where grace needs to be extended. Conflict also helps us to understand and really helps us to build humility, to build that emotional maturity. Because without conflict in the relationship, you're not able to develop emotional maturity. And I shared an example, of how, earlier during my husband and I's dating, life when we were, just getting to know each other and all of that. There was something that happened, and to this day, I still don't know what that issue was. But in that moment of conflict and how we managed it was how we were able to rise out of that situation and develop emotional maturity. So one of the things that conflict does is it helps us to to build humility. It teaches us humility. It teaches us patience, and it also teaches us that emotional maturity. And what conflict also does in relationship, especially relationship, marital relationship, is it does teach us and exposes our partner's heart, right? So not just even only in marital situation, but also in just generally in any type of relationship. They usually say that how a person acts in the moment of conflict tells you truly the condition of their heart. So one of the things that conflict does is, it exposes the other person's heart, their heart posture, what's going on in their heart. So, but conflict is not something that should be treated as an enemy. It's really an opportunity for us to grow in grace. It's an opportunity for us to develop emotional maturity, and it's also supposed to teach us humility. Now, there's something that God says in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 19. It says that, we have to be quick. It actually talks about swiftness. So we have to be very swift in listening. We have to be slow in our anger, right? And making sure that, how we address conflicts in those moments is very important. So in terms of, conflict and what the enemy does. So the enemy is actually not scared so much of the conflict, but what the enemy uses conflict to do is to bring division amongst individual. And I say this because the enemy plants seeds in the moment of conflict based on how we react. So if we in those moments don't extend grace, we're not quick to listen and quick to act. Rather, what the enemy is going to do is the enemy will divide the hearts of the individual. And he'll do that in several ways. So one of the ways the enemy does that is actually by, bringing misunderstanding, miscommunication, and assumption. So what happens is, in those moments of conflict, if you're not quick to listen or to pause and wait and reflect on the situation, you end up making assumptions. You end up, assuming things, wondering, well, is this what they meant, right? Is this why they did it? And you start interpreting their actions, right? And their motives, rather than having conversations about it. So by removing, communication, creating assumptions and all of that, the enemy has a way of dividing hearts and destroying unions. Another way that the enemy comes in and divide hearts and actually create wedges amongst couple is by bringing and introducing pride. That's another big destroyer of relationship, is pride and ego. So pride and ego in the moment of conflict. And what does this look like? So usually, like I said, every marriage has it, every relationship has that moment of conflict. But oftentimes, pride shows up as someone who says that they're not willing to forgive, they're not willing to let go. And so they take this position of being right. Or they feel that, what, I'm not supposed to apologize, right? So most traditional men or traditional, individuals, but predominantly amongst the male, right? They have this sense of, I'm a man, we don't apologize. No matter how wrong they might be in that situation, they feel that because, what, they're the man, then they don't have to apologize. I usually say that apology has nothing to do with, whether you're in a position of right or being in a position of wrong. When you apologize, what you're saying is, I value the relationship more than I value this conflict or whatever has gotten us here. And the enemy tries to introduce pride and ego to divide hearts in relationship. And then unforgiveness is another one. So unforgiveness is a way that the enemy drives a wedge, and he does this so well by causing people to hold on to bitterness in their heart. And then once there's bitterness in the heart, once there's resentment, there's anger, immediately there are thoughts of separation and thoughts of divorce that's been planted in there. So those are ways that the enemy uses conflict to drive a wedge and to bring division amongst relationships. So the goal is, how do we avoid it? Right? Knowing that conflict is inevitable in any relationship, how do we avoid this conflict? How do we manage it? How do we navigate those seasons when there's tension in the relationship, tension amongst, couples, and ensuring that it is not something that lingers on? And one of the, there are 4 ways that I've identified that we could navigate the situation. So the very first is about pausing. Take a moment to just pause. So it's natural that in the moments of conflict, you want to react, you want to respond, right? It's our natural defense mechanism. It's our natural way of responding, when there's like, arguments and all of that. You're looking for a perfect response, to give to that person when they say something, right? You're thinking about, okay, what do I say? How do I protect myself? But in the moments of conflict, the very first thing that you need to do is to pause. Don't respond right away. Don't react. Like God has asked us to do, be quick to listen. So when you listen, what you're trying to do is, you're trying to understand the other person's position. You're trying to understand where they're coming from. You're trying to really analyze the situation. And also what you're doing in that moment of, pausing, is to put your heart's condition in the right place, having your heart take the right posture. So in that moment, you're able to truly analyze and truly assess the situation without the emotions involved. So we all know that in moments of conflict, our emotions tend to, like, build up, and immediately you're getting really, angry, really frustrated about a particular situation, and there's a natural response to want to, react. But that's the time for you to actually pause, because the enemy capitalizes on your immediate move, your immediate emotional state. That's where the enemy gets in and tries to work. So the very first thing you need to do is to pause. The second the thing you need to do is listen to understand. So make sure that that's the time for you to truly understand the other person's position. So remember, I talked earlier about the enemy uses assumptions, right, to bring division. When you seek to understand, you're not making assumption. It's like coming into, an equation with a very clear mind, a very clear perspective, and really just wanting to understand the person's position, wanting to understand, where are they coming from? What is their reality? Because at times, people's perception is a reflection of their reality. It's how they see things, not necessarily what your intent and your intentions are. So when you seek to understand, when you're listening, seeking to understand your position, you oftentimes find out that, you know what, I think they misunderstood me, they misunderstood the situation, hence the reason why they've responded or reacted a certain way. And then you're able to validate their position. So seeking to understand is you putting yourself in their shoes and trying to understand what could have gone wrong from their own lens, right? And the moment you do that, it's a place of vulnerability. Not a lot of people like to be in that space, but it's a moment of you saying, you know what, maybe I was wrong in this situation. So prior to that, you could have been thinking, you know what, I was 100% right. I think they're in the wrong. But when you seek to understand their position, their perspective, and their reality, it helps you truly understand that perhaps this is a situation that could easily be resolved. So that's the second thing to do. The third thing to do is use of soft words when you're in an argument. So it's very important that the words you use are words that will not destroy the relationship, destroy the connection. So most people have a tendency that, you know what, I'm going to give back to them. Right, they're having, heated arguments or heated exchange, and someone says something and then you're responding. At times in those heated moments, there's a tendency to use unkind words. Even God, talks about it and says that a gentle response turns away wrath. And I don't know that we fully master that yet, right, as individuals, because there's a feeling that, I'm being attacked. And so I have to defend myself and say something back to the other party in response. But in the moment of argument and disagreement, choose your words kindly. There's the analogy that's been given of a nail that's been pierced through a wood. No matter how much you pull that nail out, there's still a mark, there's a dent that has been left on that wood. And our words are the exact same thing. So when you speak, certain words, or when you use certain language in the moment of arguments or heated debate, you might apologize later on, but the words already done and caused a lot of damage that might even cause irreparable harm and may not be able to rebuild that relationship. I've seen individuals that have said, you know what, 2 years ago or 5 years ago, we were having this conversation and my husband or my wife said this to me and I've forgiven them and all of that. But that really hurt because that created an emotional damage that we can't see, but creates, has a bigger impact on the individual. So it's very important that, when you're now in the seasons of conflict, that you choose your words kindly. And then lastly, be quick to resolve the argument. So there's no point, like I said, the conflict is bound to happen, but a conflict does not need to destroy your home. Be quick to resolve an argument when you are, you found that there is a conflict that does exist in any relationship, whether it's a friend, relationship with friends, with siblings, or with your spouse or partner. Be always quick to resolve it. And even God, says that we should not, let the sun go down, when we're angry. And that's because, yes, you're bound to be angry, you're bound to be upset, but don't let the sun go down, when you're angry. Don't allow it linger on for too long, because that's where the enemy is looking. The enemy is just looking for a crack. That's it. The enemy is looking for a crack. And once he finds the crack, then he will penetrate through to bring division. And what are those things that can create a crack? It's just allowing that, that conflict to linger on for too long. So one of the way you can navigate those seasons is, find a way to bring you back and restore you guys back to, a place of reconnection, a place of, rebuilding that intimacy and rebuilding that unity, and not allowing the situation that brought you apart to keep you apart for an extended or long period of time. So again, it's not about being right or trying to win the argument. It's about trying to win the union, trying to win the connection, trying to win the covenant. That's what's most important during moments of conflict, not about, who wins the argument. Because I know a lot of people focus on that. Is like they're always doing this and they're always doing that. And so their goal is just to be, about how to win the argument. Now, one thing I also wanted to, just remind you on is that conflict is inevitable. The fact that it's happening in your relationship does not mean that there's anything wrong with your relationship. If you're thinking, I'm experiencing conflict in my, marriage, there's nothing wrong. Every marriage goes through that as well, right? Every marriage goes through that. So stop labeling your marriage. Instead, what you need to do is focus on building your home, focus on building your marriage. Don't stop investing in your relationship. If you see that, there's something that you admire with other couples, you admire in other relationship, figure out how did they get there? what are things that they've done. If they're quick to forgive, if they're slow to speak and quick to listen, right? If they've invested in just thinking about the wellness and the well-being of the other party, showing care, showing love and attention, in moments of conflict, not allowing it to linger longer. That's how you can also build your home. It's easier to say the grass is greener on the other side, but seek to understand what it took for the neighbors to water their garden, right? And do the same. Water the garden of your relationship. Water the garden of your marriage. If there are weeds, which appears as conflicts in relationship, it doesn't mean that you just dig up the entire, garden out and say, you know what, I'm done with this. No, what you do is you prune it, right? You pluck out the weeds, you take it out, and then you plant seeds, right? You water the garden, and then it flourishes and it blooms. And marriage is no different from that. If you abandon a garden, the weeds will take over, and then it will take over the garden of your relationship. So that's just what I wanted to come on and share today. It's just about managing conflict in relationship. It's something that's bound to happen. It's not unique or peculiar to any particular situation. So if you're experiencing conflict, your relationship is not broken. Your relationship is just going through a season, right? And that season is not a definition of a lifetime. It's only a season that you are currently experiencing. So I just want to share this with you, and I pray that God will give you and I the grace to be able to navigate conflicts in our relationship, the grace for patience, because that's another virtue, is patience, the grace for patience when we are dealing with conflict in our relationship, and the ability to be humble in those situations, right? So that way we're not thinking about our position over the position of God and the union that he has created for us. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. If you don't have any questions, then I just want to say, thanks for joining me. I will see you next week, Saturday, for another section on Marital Bliss Unfiltered. All right, take care.